back to Market to Market. The Economic Development Board, EDB, and the Council for Competitiveness and Innovation, CCI, were established in 2011 by the Government of Trinidad and Tobago to develop and implement comprehensive strategies to accelerate sustainable economic growth and prosperity for this country. The role of the EDB is to reshape our strategies for economic development by facilitating diversification and achieving a diversified economy within the framework of sustainable development. The role of the CCI, on the other hand, is to take action to make our firms more competitive, expand exports, and improve our competitiveness ranking in the world. Join me now as I check in with Dr. Rikhi Permanand, Executive Director of the EDB and the CCI. What are the deliverables of the Council for Competitiveness and Innovation and the EDB?
For the Council for Competitiveness and Innovation, the CCI, the main deliverables are building awareness, national awareness of innovation and competitiveness, and the improvement of the Global Competitiveness Index by 20 points in 2 years. In addition to that, we also have a target of doubling non-energy exports and making existing companies more competitive. For the EDB works across basically two areas. The first is really the Diversification program, which is an identification of the industry clusters that we deem fit for long-term socioeconomic development. The second area of work for the EDB is based on the development of growth poles. These are new economic spaces, which has been defined by the medium-term policy framework 2011 to 2014. And those 5 growth poles are basically the north coast of Trinidad, east port of Spain development, east port of Spain, which is the urban regeneration program, the central area, and the southwest peninsula and northeast Tobago.
In terms of the growth pools and the different areas that you've identified, are things already on stream?
Yes, very, very much so. Some are more developed than others. We started first of all by focusing on 2 areas. One was East Port of Spain, and that's because East Port of Spain were well advanced through the East Port of Spain Development Company, which is the implementation company for the plans. And they have continued to process the plans that they have in place. With the central area, we've decided to look at the central area because the central growth pole already has really a quite well-developed energy cluster. And so we thought it was an easier target to look at. But in terms of looking at the central growth pole, what we decided to do was to get involved in really understanding the area. Because if we have more data on the area, then we can make better decisions. And what we conducted was a pilot exercise in conjunction with Arthur Lockjack Graduate School of Business, and that was completed in March of this year. Out of that, we've identified certain activities, and we're now in the process of building action plans for implementation. We're now turning our attention to do a similar study on the southwest growth pole, which is a much bigger area, and similarly we'll be doing that with Arthur Lockjack. And we're expected to start that within the next few weeks, and that exercise is likely to take 4 to 5 months for completion. We are in fact meeting pretty much after this interview to discuss some activities in northeast Tobago, and for the north coast we have started a project called Project 50, which is about the rehabilitation of the fishing communities in the 5 areas that have been identified from the west to the east, which is Maracas, Las Cuevas, Blancheshares, Matlock, and Toco. Our priority has been on focusing on Toco and Matlock, where we've made visits, initially with the Minister, and subsequent visits with a multidisciplinary team to actually start an action plan going, and we are about to start implementing those particular actions.
What are the industries identified for the Southwest and Tobago?
Well, the industries that have been identified for the Southwest is more of energy, but energy in terms of downstream energy. As you will have heard recently, there's been the move for an investment by Mitsubishi for a downstream petrochemical plant. That is a construction of a methanol facility, which will then have the capability of using methanol to create other added value products for export. That is pinpointed for Union Park in Le Bray. There are other projects that are on the horizon for going into the Bray as well. And beyond energy, it's an agricultural area. Agriculture forms part of one of the clusters that we've identified for development, which with that cluster we term as food sustainability. And the primary activity there is really to try to reduce our food import bill, which is currently running around 4 billion a year, right? So agriculture will play a big part in that. And the area itself has historically an area of tourism and cultural activities. But that's precisely what we will want to identify as we undertake the cluster mapping analysis. How real are those priorities that I've talked about beyond the investment that's going into that area?
And Tobago?
Tobago, the northeast of Tobago is really Charlotte Owen Speyside at the moment. And in fact, some work has been done, which we're going to review, as I said, following this meeting, in terms of consulting with the communities there for a eco development. So it's really taking into account the environmental aspects of that beautiful part of the country, and therefore building relevant industries, which will be ecotourism, but it will be high-rise hotels. It'll be addressing the agricultural issues. So it's basically those two areas that we'll concentrate on.
Trinidad and Tobago is currently ranked 84 out of 144 in terms of competitiveness by the World Economic Forum. Is that a fair ranking rather?
I think it's not fair. If you ask if it's fair, it is the rating. I think we have to understand that this is a gold standard that's used for measuring how a country is performing. It's been tried and tested for many years, and it's undertaken through the World Economic Forum. So it's quite a prestigious survey that's done. And therefore, whether or not we think it's fair, that is the results. It's the results that come out largely from an executive opinion survey, which is sent out to the executives in the country, be it in the private sector, the public sector. And depending on how they see Trinidad and Tobago, that is what they report on, because that survey is a perception-led survey. The index itself is not generated 100% by that survey. Roughly 80% comes from that survey, and the other 20% comes from a collection of hard data, right, which will come from areas like the Central Statistical Office, the Central Bank, and other international sources, documentation that the World Economic Forum used, such as the International Labour Organization.
What do you think contributed to the low score?
I think there are, as I said, it's perception. And when negativity occurs, it tends to remain up front in people's minds. But that aside, there are structural issues that we need to fix. We're not perfect in any way, nor is any country. And there is a recognition that some of the activities in the country will pull us down. A good example of that the Ministry of Trade and Investment talk about quite a lot now is the ease of doing business. So issues in terms of setting up a business, which can take just 1 or 2 days in other parts of the world, takes a lot longer. Not now, because we've implemented the right systems to actually take that forward. If we look at the issues that we face in terms of clearance of cargo through our ports and the administration, the bureaucracy that's aligned to that, these are things that hold us back in particular areas. If we look at the impact of crime and security on the country, that will also have a negative impact. It also has a negative impact in business, because that means there is a cost of doing business that countries where it's not so prevalent will be not having to pay for. So there are factors, and the results of the survey guide us quite well to the areas that we do well in and the areas that we need to fix. And I think that's what we need to concentrate on. If you look at macroeconomy, for example, as one element they measure, we score very well in that. So I think it gives us good insight into what we need to address. And what we've been doing at the CCI is really dissecting the 2012 results and really trying to concentrate on some of the areas that really are problematic. So, for example, we have taken the results and worked out the areas we need to work on score anywhere over 100, anywhere between 100 and 144, those are the areas that we need to start working on. And the plans that we're doing at the moment is to actually work with the key stakeholders to understand what they're doing to address it, because the CCI in itself cannot solve this problem on its own. But it needs to guide what needs to be done, work with the key stakeholders, and then hopefully get a plan that we all buy into that we can move forward and act upon.
So what strategies are we working on, or are you working on, to improve competitiveness and innovation?
Right. Well, one of the major elements that we're looking at really is the building awareness, national awareness from the grassroots for innovation, and innovation leads to competitiveness. And that program that we are working on is the Idea to Innovation, ITI, which started last year as a kick-off to this particular area of work. But just before we launch into the ITI, I think it's important to understand the difference between innovation and invention. I think people tend to mix them up. Invention really is the creation of a novel idea or method, such as the light bulb, such as the development of the internet. Innovation is really about how we add value to existing services, products, processes, services. But the adding value to it is through a very different approach, right? And you then are able to take that to market and capitalize on it. So there is an outcome, it's an applied activity. So the ITI competition is very much in line with that. It's really trying to get the nation engaged. We have creative people, they have ideas, but often with those ideas, they cannot understand how to take them forward. Sometimes, a lot of the times, it's due to the fact that they haven't got the funding ability to do it. The other times is that they have an idea, but they don't understand necessarily the business processes that they need to take and use to get that idea from an idea to reality. So the Idea to Innovation competition, ITI, was really developed along those lines. So last year, we basically invited participants over 18 years of age who had an idea against 7 sectors that were identified to submit their ideas. And if selected, they would be awarded a grant, which is different to a loan, and that grant would help them to take the idea and turn it into reality, supported by some mentors, which were really our technical partner, which is Careering. So they would work with the individuals, set the milestones that need to happen for their particular project, and then funds would be dispersed on achieving those particular milestones.
What was the response like to the competition?
The response was very, very good, actually. We had close to 400 entries. Many of them came actually on the last day of the competition. So we ended up with 400, and out of that we whittled it down to 50 projects. Teams could enter, so the actual number of people participating in the program is roughly between 80 and 90 people. And so the initial response was good. We're now 6 months into the program, and I would say it's progressing very well. Most people are still in the program. I think we have about 5 or 6 people that have dropped out of the program for various reasons. The remainder continue to work on it. We have very good prospects for something like 15 of the projects that are in the pipeline, which on an innovation program is pretty good.
You mentioned that there are 7 categories that could have been entered into. What are they?
Well, one was ICT. They're based a lot along the sustainability pillars. So ICT, and obviously there were a lot of people applying in for doing apps and various applications like that. The other was agriculture, the services industries, etc.
And the finalists cover all of them?
Oh yeah, there were entrants in every category. I would say that the ICT was more popular than some of the others, but the awardees represent all the categories, the 7 categories that we had.
Are there going to be any changes to the program from 2012?
Well, we need to be innovative, right? So we can't just do the program as it was. And given that was the first program, eye to eye. I think we learned some things from it, and then we're trying to improve it. One of the key things that we're trying to get across this year is that it's not a competition. I mean, we put it forward as a competition, and it still remains a competition, but the most important part of it is that we're trying to help creative people in our nation move along the milestones that they need to take an idea to completion, and therefore we are providing a toolkit of activities that are going to help them do that. So it's much more than just providing funding, it's teaching somebody how to fish, basically.
Which of the service and manufacturing industries do you think have the capacity to contribute significantly to this diversification thrust?
Well, services already contribute quite an important part of the non-energy exports. I think it's roughly around 50% or so of non-energy exports is through services. The difficulty about services, it's difficult to get accurate data on the measurements of them because a lot of small businesses are involved in it. The records are not necessarily there. So we shouldn't think that we're starting from a low base. And services can only improve. It's a question of how do we get more people into added value services. In terms of other areas that can achieve the targets that you're talking about, I mean, manufacturing, we have a manufacturing base, and that's largely driven at the moment on two areas, which is food and beverages and printing and packaging. So in terms of one of the deliverables, what we have to understand is how can we get these existing businesses to be more competitive, right? And some diagnostics have been done in this area, not through the CCI, because a lot of this particular activity now, with the formation of Export TT recently, will be moved and worked through Export TT. As I said before, the CCI does not have to be the implementer of it, but we will stay close to where the programs are. So Export TT have already contacted some 200 of the top exporting companies to profile them through a questionnaire of what they think they need to actually get them to be more export oriented, and that information will be used to develop the supporting programs to help them move forward. There's been some other work that's been done by Kariri in terms of selecting 30 companies and profiling those companies along some competitiveness axis. And work is going on with that to see how we can actually, it's a scorecard effectively, where some areas they'll be performing better and other areas they're not. And by mapping how companies are doing, then you're able to actually get the companies to think about what they need to do to actually get them more competitive. And more competitive basically means export, because the growth of the economy is not really going to come from domestic consumption because we are a small island state. It has to come by taking the products, our knowledge, our experiences that we have, applying them into products and services that markets outside of Trinidad and Tobago.
The company originally started in Canada, decided to open an office here. We're unique in the territory in that we're very focused on just application business solutions.